New York City is in the midst of another big building boom, from the brand new and massive New York Times office space on 42nd Street to the recently constructed Time Warner shopping complex. The buildings are going up at a record-setting pace, and this includes new apartment developments as well. Darius Solomon, associate broker at Prudential Douglas Elliman, is back with us this morning. We're going to take a closer look at the popularity of the new developments for a living. Darius, what's the attraction for people? There's so many existing apartment buildings in New York. What's the attraction for people going into these new buildings that they're building right now?
Well, the most important thing is essentially the brand new factor. You know, there are great apartments all over Manhattan and outside, but here is the first one of the cases where you can walk in and have a place that has never been lived in, that has finishes that have been set up exactly almost to your taste, or you've been able to choose. So it's a first place that's never been lived in.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing though, because you're looking at a place, in some cases, places you have to look at on paper because it's not built yet.
Well, this is very true, and some developments might have apartments in existing that have been built already, and you might be looking 2 years out. So planning is involved, especially.
Let's talk about that planning. The first thing is to look at the values for these apartments, because that's going to be a little different than buying into other places.
Yes, I mean, when you're looking at the average dollar per square foot, let's say for condominiums about $11.70 currently, you're going to see that the average prices tend to lean on the higher side of the averages of new developments. It could be $1,200, $1,300, $1,400, even $2,000 a square foot. So it's typically going to lean to the more expensive side of the averages.
Another interesting aspect, and you brought this up just a second ago, which is the time frame, because here you're looking at something that's due to be built at a certain time.
You have to plan ahead. You might be purchasing in a property which might not have apartments ready for another year. Do you have a property that you currently live in that you want to sell? Are you renting? You really need to take time and plan out how this will happen so that you don't have to end up with temporary housing in between. I definitely, if you're working with a broker, I would discuss it very closely to really to plan out your timing, because it can make a big difference.
What about financing? How is that different from buying an existing place?
Well, it's important to know that when you're buying an existing place, you close and you do your financing right there, move in. Essentially, with a new development, you don't close until the day the apartment is ready. So you might be talking a year out. There are some banks that will let you lock in a rate for a year on a new development. They tend to be interest only, and there are going to be some upfront costs. So if you're very worried about where the interest rate, although we don't know what will happen next year, you can, in cases, lock it or wait till closing time and see what the rates are then.
What about the closing costs for these types of developments?
Well, this is important. There are additional costs that are involved in buying new developments. In new developments, you'll find that the buyer, unlike purchasing from an individual who owns an existing property, the seller pays the transfer taxes and their attorney fees. With a new development, you will be most likely responsible for New York City, New York State transfer taxes, and possibly even the developer's attorney's fees. Using a $1 million apartment as an example, you could be talking about $20,000 additional in closing costs. Now, in a $1 million purchase, don't let the $20,000 stop you from doing that, but it's also important to know what your costs are going to be.
So, Darius, if I'm a buyer and I'm looking at all my options, what's the bottom line, new versus existing?
Well, the bottom line, really, if you're looking at new developments, a lot of the new developments coming up are really serving up the amenities. Anything from yoga studios, Pilates studios. If you want brand new, you want to move in a place that's almost like a hotel, even bowling alleys.
Right, yeah, you say one place has a bowling alley.
You know, then look at the new developments. If you're really looking for your top dollar to square foot, you're really best off still looking at everything available in existing buildings that might have been very nicely renovated, where you'll probably find a slightly better dollar to square foot value.
Yeah, but very interesting to see all the difference between the both. Darius, as always, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it very much.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, up next,